Okay, today's bell work we're going to be solving two-step equations. So the first equation, we are going to be solving a two-step. So when I solve a two-step equation, I want to ask myself, what two operations do I have in this problem? In this problem, I have subtraction and I have multiplication. So I'm going to want to undo subtraction by doing the opposite, which would be adding 6 to both sides. This cancels, so I'm left with negative 2/5 v equals, different signs I'm going to subtract, so it's going to be 4. Keep the sign of the bigger number, negative 4. Now, v is still not by itself, so I have to undo that by doing the opposite. So if we remember back from our rational coefficients, we learned that if I have a fraction coefficient, I undo it by multiplying by its reciprocal or by its flipped version. Do not forget to bring the negative sign with it. This cancels. I'm left with v. I can put this over 1. Negative 4 times negative 5 leaves me with 20. 1 times 2 gives me 2. I simplify that, and I get 10 over 1, or just 10. The second problem, I have addition and multiplication, so I'm going to undo addition by subtracting it to the other side. That cancels. 3 minus 3 gives me 0, so that leaves me with 2x. 25 minus 3 gives me 22. So now I need to get rid of multiplication, so I get rid of that by dividing by 2. 2 divided by 2 leaves me with 1, or just x. 22 divided by 2 leaves me with 11. Alright, on today's notes, we're going to learn that an equation like 2 times w plus 3x equals 114 is in the form of p times x plus q. It contains two factors. The first factor is p. The second factor is your x plus q. You must use the distributive property to solve, okay? So whenever I see this form p times x plus q, I'm going to think distributive property. So I'm going to look at the number on the outside. I'm going to multiply it to both numbers on the inside. So 2 times x gives me 2x. 2 times 4 gives me positive 8. Now all I have is a two-step equation. So I get rid of plus 8 by minusing it to both sides. 8 minus 8 gives me 0, so I'm left with 2x. 20 minus 8 leaves me with 12. So now I'm going to divide both sides by 2. X is equal to 6. Sometimes the factor p in px plus q will be either a fraction or a decimal. If it's a decimal, you're going to solve it just like you did up here. It's just instead of working with whole numbers, you'll be working with decimals. If it's a fraction, we're going to do it like we have this example right here. Now, back when I learned fraction coefficients, I learned that if I am multiplying a fraction, I can undo it by multiplying by its reciprocal. So I can do the same thing if I'm distributing a fraction. Only if it's on the outside being multiplied can I do this. I see 1/4 is being multiplied, so I can undo it by multiplying by its reciprocal. If I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. This cancels. I'm going to write it up over here. I'm left with d minus 3 equals negative times a positive gives me a negative. 15 times 4 gives me a 60. Now, I have a one-step equation. I have to get rid of my subtraction first, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. This cancels. I'm left with d. A negative and a positive, you end up subtracting. So 60 minus 3 gives me 57. Keep the sign of the bigger number. And there you go. D equals negative 557. Sorry. The next thing and last thing we are learning is combining like terms. Combining like terms is when you combine terms with the same variable, or you can combine the consonants. Consonants are numbers with no variables. Okay, so that means they have no letter attached. So I'm going to look at this example right here. So I first see that I have a p q plus, or x plus q right here. I have that p times x plus q. So I want to get rid of this first, which we learned that we do distributive property. I always, if I have a negative sign, I circle it so I know it goes with my number. So I'm going to do negative 3 times 2, and I'm going to get negative 6h. I'm going to do negative 3 times 7. Negative times a positive gives me a negative, and 3 times 7 gives me 21. Everything else that's outside the parentheses, I'm just going to go ahead and write it. So I have plus 3h minus 5 equals 31. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, okay, can I combine anything on the same side? When I say same side, I mean the same side of the equal sign. So you have a left side, you have a right side. On the right side, all I have is 31, so I just bring that down. However, on the left side, I can see I have multiple terms. I have my terms with my h. So if they have the same variable, I can add or subtract them. They have different signs. I have a negative 6 and a positive 3, so I'm going to get 3h. Keep the sign of the bigger number, so that's going to be negative 3h. Next, I see I have two just plain old numbers. I have negative 21 and I have negative 5, so I can go ahead and combine my constants. So, negative plus a negative keeps it a negative, and I add them together. So 21 plus 5 gives me 26. At this point, now I've just made it into a two-step equation. So I want to get rid of subtraction first. So I'm going to add 26 to both sides. This cancels because it zeroes out. I'm left with negative 3h. 31 plus 26 gives me 57. Now, h is not by itself yet, so I'm going to divide. Don't forget to keep the negative. Divide by negative 3. This cancels into a 1, so I'm left with h is equal to negative 19. At this point, you need to complete the on your own. Make sure it is done by the time we do a folder check.